Welcome to Macon Memories. This is Lynda Wright at Randolph-Macon College. Today is January 15th, 2013, and today I'm interviewing Mr. Reginald Barley, class of 1974. Mr. Barley, can you state your name and tell us a little bit about your background, where you were born and raised, and where you went to high school?
Okay. I'm Reginald Barley. I was born and raised in Richmond, Virginia. I have four brothers, by the way, but we grew up in the inner city, Churchill section, specifically Creighton Court, the city of Richmond. I matriculated in the public school system and graduated from Armstrong High School in 1970.
Very good. Can you tell me how you first thought about attending Randolph-Macon College and how you happened to apply and enroll?
Well, I was in the Upward Bound program my senior year in high school, and the Upward Bound counselor noticed the fact that all the schools that I applied to had been small liberal arts schools in the Northeast. So he said, well, have you considered Randolph-Macon College? My response was, Randolph, who is he? And he said, Randolph-Macon College up in Ashland. I said, I've never heard of the school, really. Mr. Anderson was from Ashland, Hanover. He said, well, why don't you think about it? He said, I'll get you some literature on it, and we'll take a look at it. I said, okay. And so he provided me with some literature. And because he was from Ashland and Hanover, he said, well, why don't we do this? I'll give you a ride up there so that you can take a look at the campus, which is what he did. And he said, well, it won't hurt to apply either. He said they have some interesting things going on up there. He said one is that they're integrating now. He said, but I think that you would think the experience at Macon would be similar to what you'd probably get in many ways at some of these small Northeast liberal arts schools that you had applied to. Mm-hmm. So I applied. I came up for a visit. I did and didn't like the visit.
Can you say more about that? What that was like, the visit? What was good and what was not so good?
When I arrived up here, it was for one of the dates. What do they call it? I'll think of it in a minute. We're talking about over 40 years ago.
Well, prospective student visiting day. Yeah.
Yes, mm-hmm. Something like that. And it was close to lunchtime. Now, they had a tradition at Macon then. Every day at 1:15, they played Dixie on the chimes of the school chapel. That was an immediate turnoff for me. Mm-hmm. But I was warmly received. There were only 2 African-American students on campus at the time, and I knew one, Floyd Claiborne, because he had gone to high school with me. He was a year ahead of me.
Okay.
And so he walked me through campus, and because it was close to home, mm-hmm. I gave it a lot of consideration, and I said, well, okay, I'll give it a try.
So Floyd Claiborne must have been having a fairly good experience if you connected with him.
Well, he had an experience.
He was having an experience anyway.
Yes.
Well, how did your family and friends feel about your decision to come to Randolph-Macon?
It was mixed. One thing is many of my friends had never heard of Randolph-Macon mm-hmm. College. My parents were very happy that I was attending a school close to home. Mm-hmm. I have 4 brothers, as I said before. 3 were ahead of me, and so all 3 of them were away in school at the time. And so they were happy that I was attending school close to home. My dad and my mom were very, very receptive toward me and encouraging, as a matter of fact. Mm-hmm. They said it would be a totally different experience for you, and you could benefit from it.
Mm-hmm. Good. Well, tell us what it was like when you arrived on campus, freshman year, where you lived and your roommate and the dorm situation. Can you talk about that?
I lived in the motel dorms. Okay. My roommate was Ben McDivitt, a wonderful guy. He was from up in New Jersey, Perth Amboy, to be specific. And Ben was very, very open-minded. He showed me around campus, and he said, Reggie, you're going to have some problems here. He said, but things will be okay. He said, you can always rely on me to be your backup. And he said, I'll keep you posted of everything that's going on. My first night at Randolph Macon, I closed the door to my dorm, and I heard the big N word a few times.
Mm-hmm. Was Ben a upperclassman?
He was a senior.
Sounds like he would. Right. Okay.
Yes.
Well, that was good. They paired you with somebody who knew the ropes,
Yes.
and so that was a good match.
And I knew in Floyd Claiborne, as I said before,
Mm-hmm.
was my high school homeboy, and so I knew Floyd also.
Mm-hmm. How about?
Let me say
go
this:
ahead.
when my parents helped me, I didn't have very much. We had a couple bags, unloading everything. Henry Lee Talifera was the chief custodian,
Mm-hmm.
and he walked over and introduced himself to my parents, and he said, "Mr. and Ms. Barley, let me assure you one thing: we're gonna take real good care of your boy while he's here." That was a comforting level,
Yes.
For my parents and me also.
And for you to know there was someone right away that you knew who was
Yes,
you could call on.
yes.
Did you have any other people like that on campus that you felt were looking out for you, particularly?
James Henry, who was the head of the print shop.
Mm-hmm.
James Henry, and we call Henry Lee Talifera Dippy Lee because he was getting into everybody's business all the time. But they were like fatherly images for me when I was on campus. They were very protective of me when I was on campus, and so they were wonderful. And then Emily Goings, who worked in the dining hall, was very motherly toward me. So those were people who I befriended and treated me like family. And they really helped me get over what was cultural shock for me in coming from the inner city to Randolph-Macon College because my high school was not integrated at all.
Mm-hmm.
When I graduated from Armstrong, there were 535 African Americans in my class. That was it.
Mm-hmm. So you didn't have any experience with an integrated
Zero.
School. Wow.
Zero. I went from a high school and a cultural background that was practically 100% black to Randolph-Macon, where I represented 1/2 of 1% of the entire student and faculty population.
Mm-hmm. How do you, if you can recall, how as a freshman you felt? Did you you knew that when you came in what the situation was going to be like, but the culture shock. Can you say a little bit more about that?
Well, actually, when I came in, I tried very hard, which was a mistake. I tried very hard to assimilate into the culture at Randolph-Macon without recognizing there are a lot of socioeconomic differences between myself and my classmates and everyone else in the school, and the social environment of Randolph-Macon, which centered around the fraternities, and then going back and forth, let's say, to Mary Washington College, which is where we went quite often, and oftentimes to VCU.
Mm-hmm. And did you participate in those road trips, the visiting?
Almost all of them.
Oh, good. Okay. Okay. You want to talk about that a little bit? Social life on campus and that kind of thing?
Well, by nature, I'm an introvert. And so it was very difficult for me to get out and be very social because of my personality itself. I am not naturally an outgoing person.
Mm-hmm.
And so you'd have to pull me out. So in this case, we had Ben, who was very good, and he was outgoing. Bill Smith, who was president of the Student Government Association. I would hop rides with them and some of the other freshmen, and we would go to the mixers at different schools. We liked Mary Washington a lot because there were 25 girls up there, 2,500, I should say,
Yeah.
and they were just waiting for us. We would compete with the Marines from Quantico, but otherwise they were fair game for us.
That's good. And how about VCU? What was it like to go back into Richmond, since you were from Richmond, when you would go to, you mentioned VCU social-wise?
VCU had 2 ladies' dorms, Rhodes Hall and Johnson Hall. Between those 2 dorms, about 2,000 women. Wow.
That was pretty good. And you were on your home turf a little bit, so you knew where to go or what to do when you got to Richmond?
Not really.
No.
Not really, because having grown up in Richmond, and I grew up in Creighton Court, um, actually, I didn't venture that far away from home or from school. Um, and so, and as I said before, I am not naturally outgoing, and so I would not have been inclined to get around to a lot of different places in the city.
But going with other folks, then that made it easier.
What it was difficult once my brothers went away to school, because they were my best friends to a
Yeah.
great extent, and they were the ones who were outgoing, and I would try to hang with them as best I could.
Let's talk a little bit about academics. Coming from Armstrong High School, can you talk about the transition, which as a freshman, and what your major was, and which classes you particularly thrived in or enjoyed?
The academic transition was not difficult at all. I was a good pupil in school. I think I was in the top 5% of my class, so that was not a problem at all. I had a wonderful faculty advisor, Dr. H. Burnell Panel, one of the finest gentlemen you would ever meet, and I have ever met in my life. I mean, he had a profound impact on me. Maybe we can talk about him later on. But Dr. Panel was my faculty advisor, and he guided me through different classes and professors, and believe me, he did have to guide me. He knew who I could not have as a professor. There were a number of professors who I could not go into their classes.
And he was just up front to tell you that.
He came right out and told me.
So he helped you with your schedule, said, we're going to take this, we're going to stay away from that.
Yes.
What did you major in?
Well, I started out intending to major in biology and to become a doctor. That was my ambition. I had a little incident after the summer of my freshman year, and I changed gears, and I decided to become a lawyer. And once I decided to become a lawyer, I changed majors to political science, which was a wonderful decision that I made.
Oh, okay. Any particularly faculty members in that department, mentors, any?
I had a wonderful mentor, Dr. Well, I don't even know if he was a doctor or not, but Dr. Lee Solomon. He was more of a fatherly figure for me. As a matter of fact, I would go out to his house a lot of times. He invited me into a lot of different things, and he took me under his wing. He said, first class I had him, he said, "Reggie, you can't write a lick." I said, "Huh?" He said, "You cannot write a lick." So that Christmas came along, and now Dr. Solomon was Jewish. When Christmas came along, Dr. Solomon gave me a book. The book that he gave me was Elements of Style by Strunk and White. He said, "Read this, follow this," and he said, "You will learn to write." And he proceeded to teach me to write. He was one of my toughest critics when it came to writing, which was one of the greatest things that happened to me.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
I bet you still have that Strunk and White.
Well,
Or a
I
later
have
version.
that one, as well as probably two other ones in the library in my house, because I presented one to each of my kids. I have two kids, a 21-year-old and a 28-year-old. And so each of them, when they were in high school, so that they would get an early indoctrination of elements of style and writing.
Excellent. That's
But
very
Dr. Bruce Unger, he was he was one of the most incredible professors that I have ever had.
good. Yes, he was greatly loved here.
Yes, he
and
was.
here when I first came. Right. And you mentioned a few staff members already, but besides faculty, and you mentioned a few staff members. Anybody else on campus that particularly took you under their wing, or you were partial to?
Pete Kilgore, who taught speech and drama, he was an instigator. But he encouraged me to be myself. He said, "Reggie, you're not white. Don't try to be white." He said, "You bring to Randolph-Macon College a wonderful cultural experience." He said, "We can learn a lot from you." He said, you will not get as much from Randolph-Macon College as Randolph-Macon College will ever get from you if you share who you are and from where you came and how you got here. And I've always remembered that.
That's wonderful. Did you feel free to live into that?
I tried as best I could. I really did. And I have been trying all my life to always be myself. And and that's why I said when you look at the Pete Kilgoas and you look at the H. Burnell panels and the impact that they had on me, in introspectively looking, and then the impact of the outside world that it could have on me. And those are lessons that I learned from those two professors when I was here at Macon.
That's wonderful. How about extracurricular activities? Anything you participated in? Did you participate in any sports or clubs?
I did not participate in any kind of sports. And what was interesting is that, again, we're talking about the early 70s. And whenever individuals, alumni, parents would see me walking down the street, they would say, "Oh, do you play basketball?" I said, "No, I do not play basketball." They were almost in disbelief that I was not an athlete. And so I did get involved in, I loved all intramural activities.
You did play it.
Yes. But again, you look at my personality. I'm not the kind of person who's going to get out and get himself involved in a lot. Now, I was an instigator. If you talk to some students, they say, well, if you want to go rattle something up, you find Reggie Barley.
What kind of things did you instigate?
Well, some things I didn't instigate. I was just myself. I had an incident at a basketball game. And it was very interesting is because I was protesting the war in Vietnam. And in protesting the war in Vietnam, I was just being myself. Being myself, the national anthem was being played, and my way of protesting the war in Vietnam was to sit for the national anthem. So I think it took Mr. White about 8 or 10 games before he noticed that I was sitting for the national anthem. And before I knew what was going on, I was sitting there and I felt this big hand slap on my leg and said, "Damn it, Reggie, why didn't you stand for the national anthem?" And I looked at him and I said, "First, take your hand off my leg." And I said, "Second," I said, "because I didn't want to." He said, "What do you mean you didn't want to?" I said, "I have a right not to stand if I don't want." "Oh, what are you talking about?" He said, "Well, come to my office tomorrow morning at 9 and we'll talk about that." I said, "No, sir, I have class." "When do you not have class?" "I want you in my office." I said, "Sometime in the afternoon." He said, "All right, 3 o'clock. I said, "Yes, sir." Well, what that did was that galvanized a lot of members on campus, faculty members on campus. It's a liberal arts school. And they came to my support even before I could get to Mr. White's office. And you had the Mr. Ungers and Mr. Solomon. They were relating to me the old Jehovah's Witnesses on cases that went before the Supreme Court. And so when I met with Mr. White, who was a lawyer, by the way, he backed down. And I expressed to him my free expression. And I said, you had people burning flags and all these kinds of things, and I'm just quietly protesting in my own way. And there were some turbulent years here, 69 and 70 in particular, involving the war. And I was just doing it very quietly. But I think that the student body recognized the fact that I stood up to Mr. White, because there were other instances in which Mr. White didn't exactly see eye to eye.
Well, can you say more?
Well, there were issues involving, at that time, visitation of girls in the dorms.
Right.
And I made the front page of the Richmond newspaper because I said, well, why don't we quietly have a nighttime vigil in front of the president's house? And there we were, about 150 of us, with candles, because the school had just become co-ed, so we had some girls with us also. And we were walking around the president's house with our candles. And It must have been a slow day for news in Richmond because they picked it up. They were on the headline of the newspaper.
Uh-huh.
And again, where did I end up? In the president's office. I never spent 1 minute in Dean Andrews' office. Never.
Mm-hmm.
I was called straight to the president's
You went right to
office
the
every
top.
time.
You went right to the top.
He and I talked about Dixie. And I said, it offends me.
Mm-hmm.
I said, that's the battle hymn of the Confederacy. He said, well, it's part of our tradition here. He said, there are a number of students here who think well of it. He said, you're probably the only black student here who has a problem with these, because nobody said anything about it before. And so I think it may have been about a week later or something like that, I was over in a chapel and talking to the late Mr. Bill Gibson, who's a wonderful gentleman also, because he's the one who facilitated my trip to Graz.
Mm-hmm.
But in the case of Mr. Gibson, I was talking to him about how I was offended by Dixie on the chimes every day at 1:15. Believe me, every day at 1:15. And I think that Mr. Gibson could feel my hurt.
Mm-hmm.
I do not think that Dixie has been played on those chimes since.
Wow, so that was a big change that came about.
Yes.
Because you spoke up.
Yes.
Yeah.
But that was only the beginning. A lot of other things came about last year here.
Well, keep going. Let's talk about the changes that you saw or helped implement.
I didn't say I have implemented them. I said I expressed my opinion on different things,
okay.
Which I think that in many ways I disagree with a lot of students on. But I thought that they needed to hear a different perspective from someone who was different from most other students here. The black student body, if you would call it a black student body here, was not a monolithic group by no stretch of anybody's imagination. So I had my differences even with some of the students of color here.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't really call me militant, but they said, well, you are different. And in many ways, they said, well, you're braver than we are. You at least will express your opinion. Even though we share your opinion, we don't necessarily agree that you should talk about it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I didn't mind talking about my opinions on different things involving culture and race, different things that were going on around on campus.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So when you came, you said there had been some a war protest in 69, 70, or do you remember any other student conflicts or protest things? Because it was a very turbulent time for higher education and the country in general.
Well, if in my case, if you represent such a small minority of students and opinions on campus, Reginald Macon is still a southern campus to a great extent. The open-mindedness was not there. There were some students here who were more open-minded than others, but they were for sure in the minority.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the areas in which many of the students and I really agreed on were issues involving the girls when the school first became co-ed, and that some of the things that were going on troubled me in many ways. I was a resident assistant,
Mm-hmm.
and as a resident assistant, when the school was all male, we had our code of silence. Girls were in those dorms all the time, all night.
Mm-hmm.
No big deal. No one was ever prosecuted before the conduct council because of that. The school became co-ed. Well, there were girls who were snitches on each other, which presented a lot of problems, and they were very resistant in a lot of ways to the visitation rules that we had for the school, which meant that the guys had to be out of the girls' dorm by 11 and vice versa, 11 o'clock only on weekends. And so we protested that. We said we were much more mature young adults, and we should be given more freedom in interacting with our fellow students and having girls or boys in our dorms
Mm-hmm.
during times beyond from 10 until 11 on weekends, and that was all we had.
Mm-hmm. Do you recall how long that tight restriction was really able to last?
Well, it extended until we had it extended until midnight when I left.
Wow. So it was still pretty locked up.
It was pretty locked down. That's exactly right. And one of the jobs that I had on campus was to monitor the individuals who came in and out of Newman Hall. The guys had to sign in when they came in, and I was there at the sign-in desk. And there at the sign-in desk, I kept track of everybody who came in and made sure that they came out. And I checked the doors to make sure that wedges were not put in those doors. And the dorm mother was a very nice lady. Her name was Mama J. And she and I got along very well. She liked me because I went to Sunday school, and sometimes I said I might be late getting over there for work because of Sunday school and church activities. She said, "That's great." My mouth, I blew it one day. And I really blew it. Because she felt free to come down and talk to me about everything that was going on, gossipy. She's a little old lady. She became gossipy at times. So she came out one day and she said, "Reggie," she said, "I've been talking to a lot of the girls here, and they said that we can count the number of virgins that we have in this dormitory on one hand." She said, "That's terrible." I said, "Why?" And she said, "Well, all grooms want their brides to be virgins on their wedding night." I said, "I don't." She looked at me and she said, "You don't?" I said, "No. Why buy a shoe without trying it on first?" She looked at me. Well, after that day, I did not get another Temple orange or an apple from Mama J.
Oh.
I should not have said that, but I couldn't pass up the temptation.
But she brought it up, so she asked for it. It sounds like.
And I thought it was good that she hear a view that was different from hers. I don't know if I was disrespectful toward her in communicating it in the way that I did, but it became a generational thing, and her thoughts were very much in the past.
Mm-hmm. We're talking about the early years of having women on campus. That 70, 71, those early years of women coincided pretty much around the same time as the early years of African Americans on campus. Now, there were a lot more women when they went co-ed than there were black students when they desegregated. But do you think the experience of women at Randolph-Macon had any similarities at the time with the experience that you or your other early black students had?
No, not at all.
Because they had a larger number.
There were 55.
The numbers.
There were 55 in that initial class that came in, and then the following year, the class was even larger than that. Mm-hmm. And so, by sheer numbers, it had a greater impact because of the numbers, but it affected them differently because they represented a much larger number of each class. They had their own dorms, and so I cannot account for how the women felt when they first came here, because I think that their experiences were much different, and they did not have the history that blacks had in America. Let me relate to you another experience that I had. Every year, Randolph-Macon always had one of its students work at a local cleaners. I forgot the name of the cleaners. I'll think of it in a minute. But Merrill Barton, who was director of placement here, and I was sitting right in his office when he called the gentleman from the cleaners. He said, "Well, I have the young man sitting here right now. His name is Reginald Barley, and he'll be coming down and driving the truck back and forth from one of the locations to the other," which is something that a Randolph-Macon student had done for at least the prior 15 years. Well, when I went there, I walked on down there. When I arrived there, I introduced myself. and man's last name was Williams. I'll never forget it. His eyes became as big as $2 silver when he looked at me. He said, "Oh, I thought I told Mr. Barton that I was not going to hire anybody this year." I said, "I was sitting right there in his office when you asked him to send me right down, and this was 5 minutes ago." Oh, he must have misunderstood me. I didn't get the job. And I knew exactly what was going on, and I was hurt by it. I came back, informed Mr. Barton about what happened, and he was not going to take a chance in sending me back into Ashland for one of the jobs which had historically gone to Macon students. The town of Ashland was, and the companies were very good at hiring Randolph-Macon students for part-time jobs. But he was not going to take that chance, so he gave me the job over in the gym. Now, the job that I had in the gym was a position that historically had been reserved for upperclassmen, seniors in particular. And the person who thought he was going to get the job, wonderful fella, Roland Pfefferkorn. He was from up in Pennsylvania. I remember that, Lehigh Valley, Pennsylvania. Roland learned that I had the job rather than he. And he became very, very upset. And he talked to Mr. Barton about it, and then he came to talk to me about it. And when he came and talked to me about it, he went from upset to very, very mad. He was pissed. Not at me, but at the guy.
At the cleaners.
At the cleaners.
Well, how did you find the Ashland community? What was your experience like as you left campus and went around to Ashland and, identified yourself as a Randolph-Macon student? Did you have much interaction with the town?
Let's put it this way. Guys from Randolph-Macon, I have to say guys, from Randolph-Macon could not go into Ashland by themselves or in even groups of twos, because the rednecks would beat them up if they thought that they were Randolph-Macon students. We had a number of students who were beaten up. And so it was a rare occasion in which Macon students would go into town by themselves or even in twos. Now, mind you that in town for Randolph-Macon was that little shopping center.
Right. Wow. Well, that certainly is very different. It's
called Andy's was there, and the guys couldn't go there. You get beat up in a blink of the eye.
So the college was pretty isolated from the town, you're saying? Then,
very much so. Very much so.
Yeah, that sounds very different than today.
Yes, I'm sure the college has become very well integrated into the community, and Ashland is so much different than what it was 40 some years ago when I first arrived here.
I'm going to jump around here a little bit. You talked about when you left campus, talk about social life, and you went to Mary Washington and VCU and things like that. But can you talk about the social life on campus? What the social scene was like, and which situations fostered the most interaction between black and white students on campus? Outside of class, socially.
There was none.
There was no interaction?
There was interaction, but as far as actual socializing, most socializing on campus centered around the fraternities.
Right.
And we went into some fraternities. We certainly were not going over to that KA house, I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
And some of them, Lambda Chi Alpha were the most receptive. Phi Delta were pretty decent guys. For the most part, SAEs were decent guys. They treated us nicely when we went over into those fraternities. As a matter of fact, Floyd Claiborne was a member of Lambda Chi Alpha. He was the African American who was a year ahead of me. He was a member, and they rushed me. As a matter of fact, I declined, and the primary reason why I declined was I could not get past in the little curio as soon as you walked into the fraternity house. This little redneck who was in the curio that had a Confederate flag and said, "Forget hell." I could not get past that. Notwithstanding the fact that most of the guys were very, very decent and genuine guys.
There was a black fraternity formed in about 73 or 74, Omega Psi Phi.
Yeah, they formed, and they were forming as I was graduating. My priority at the time was getting into law school, and so I was not a party to that. As a matter of fact, one of my brothers is an Omega Psi Phi, and I was not interested in it. Again, that's beyond my personality in getting involved in something like that.
Right. As part of a very small minority on campus, did you feel that everyone knew who you were? Did you feel scrutinized? Did you feel everybody knew who you were?
Everybody on Randolph Macon's campus knew Reggie Barley. Believe me.
Was that a good feeling?
Sometimes not.
Yeah.
Sometimes not.
What were the advantages? What were the times when it felt good, and what were the times when, sometimes not?
I did not learn about a lot of things until afterwards. I came up to a Board of Associates meeting, and Allison O'Brien, who's always been very active on campus, and she's a wonderful young lady when I was here also. She said, "Reggie, I heard about you as soon as I set foot on campus, that he is mean."
Oh.
I said, "Wow." And so I never smiled. My natural expression is not one of a smile. And because of my insecurity, I think that the frown and mean look that I had masked the insecurity that I had. And so I would look at people and I wouldn't smile. And so many of the students, particularly the girls, felt that I was a mean guy, which was not the case. And so Allison related, she said, "I heard all about you." She said, "And I remember the first time I saw you, I was afraid to speak." And she said, but she spoke anyway. And she said, "I didn't think that you knew how to smile until you did and spoke." She was a little bit different, and I did not know that many of the students viewed me in that way because I didn't smile, and they probably didn't know why I did not smile.
Didn't realize you were shy or
shy and insecure.
Yeah.
That's right.
Well, how do you feel that you were accepted generally by the student body at Randolph-Macon, or did that change, as the years went on? As you became a senior, maybe a little bit more confident, did you feel like that eased up a little bit?
No.
That's just the personality, and
That's the personality, and again, I don't think that Randolph-Macon College and the South in particular had enough experiences with integration for it to become as much of a common feeling as there is now. We were very much in transition back in 19. You have to understand, Haywood came here in '66, and then in '68 you had Larry Langford, Dennis Howard, and Howard Stevens. All three of them were athletes. And then in '69 you had Bobby Butler and Floyd Claiborne. Bobby was a very, very quiet guy, and Floyd was a football player part-time. And then in my class, there was myself, James Taylor, Fletcher Johnson, us three. And so it was very much a period of transition, and they had to as much adjust to being around people of color as we had to adjust to interacting with whites.
Well, going back to what you said about when the college went co-ed and just the sheer numbers, do you think that, I guess it's irrelevant really, but I'm just wondering what you think about if the college had accepted more African-American students early on, if that would have eased things, or was it just a time of transition that had to be lived through no matter what?
I think that the increased interaction that whites would have had with people of color would have improved things considerably.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think there were more than 3 occasions in which I had another African American in class with me.
Mm-hmm. So it was you were always fairly isolated.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The whole time it sounds like you would have felt that way.
Yes.
Did life at Randolph-Macon get easier as the years went on, or more difficult?
After my freshman year, I considered leaving. Halfway through my sophomore year, I decided to leave. Well, my parents were not going to have that.
Mm-hmm.
And so they said, my dad was very, very hard. He said, wait a minute. He said, no, you're not leaving. He said, what's your last name? I said, why is that relevant? He said, what's your last name? I said, Barley. He said, none of my sons, neither of the 5 of you, will be a quitter. You are going back up there. And he said, you're going to battle whatever you're dealing with up there. Mm-hmm. He said, my sons are fighters. I said, Dad, you don't know, this is different. At that point in time, the warmth of my mother came into play, and her softness. And she said, well, we'll be okay. You know, you're always close to home. Mm-hmm. She said, Mr. Tyler Farrer has always said he's going to take care of you on campus. And she said, you can deal with it. She said, she was relating to me. It's interesting that we're talking today what the dream of Dr. King was. Mm-hmm. This is Martin Luther King's birthday. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, but then tell us about, you then decided to go study abroad. Was that during the school year, or was that in the summertime?
That was in the summer.
After
my junior year.
Junior year. So yes. I was thinking it was after your sophomore year when you thought you would leave, but no. So you came back for your junior year, and yes. Tell about how that opportunity came up.
Again, Mr. Gibson and Mr. Solomon said, well, we have GROTS, which is a wonderful experience, and I had never heard of it. And so Mr. Gibson provided me with a lot of literature on it. And I said, well, tell me, how am I going to get over there? I said, I don't have any money. He said, well, let me work on that. And so he worked on it, and a lady I have never met, her name, and never did meet, her name was Mary Ball. She lived down in Virginia Beach. She provided me with the funds.
How wonderful.
To get there. The chairman of the board of Randolph-Macon College at that time, I can't think of Mr. Lipscomb's first name.
Frank?
Maybe Frank Lipscomb. Okay. But he was the chairman of the board of Pan Am Airlines also. And how did I get to GROTS?
Oh, very good.
Pan Am Airlines.
Uh-huh.
And Mr. Gibson made all of that work. Mm-hmm. And so over the summers, I had always worked, and the work I made good money at Philip Morris. Always supplemented whatever shortcomings there were for my tuition and fees, and so I was concerned about that. The first day I arrived and I checked my mailbox, there was a letter from D.P. Reed, the college treasurer.
Yeah, right.
My tuition for my first semester senior year was paid.
Oh, how wonderful.
Mary Ball paid that tuition for me. I never met the lady.
What was her connection with Randolph-Macon?
She was somebody that Mr. Gibson knew.
Uh-huh.
And I think that she'd given the school some money on other occasions also. Mm-hmm. But Mr. Gibson told her about me, and she became interested in me. I never met the lady. I sent her probably at least a dozen postcards everywhere I went.
Oh, no, I bet she loved that.
I sent her a postcard.
Yeah. That's wonderful. I want to find out more about her. That's great.
Yeah.
Do you have any black friends who were also trailblazers at predominantly white institutions?
We all were.
Anybody from high school? Oh, I met, not at Randolph-Macon, friends from high school who went to, had a similar experience that you had here or anything like that.
Most of us were, because there was very little integration of schools. I had a classmate who was the first African American to graduate from Hollins College. One of my classmates was the first, or at least close to the first, who graduated from Roanoke College.
Just say, how did your experience at Randolph-Macon prepare you for your law school experience?
First thing is, I was given a great academic foundation. Good. And that really helped. And I would say that helped more than anything else. But again, the cultural adaptions that I had to make here, I could make that transition on to law school at the College of William and Mary, where I was one of 4 African Americans in my class there, one of 11 in the entire school, law school that is. And so it made that transition a whole lot easier. But with that foundation that I had, I was very, very well prepared for law school.
Very good. Can you think of any ways the college culture, or can you name the ways the college culture changed during your time at Randolph-Macon as a result of the desegregation?
I think that simply having races interact with each other, having individuals of different cultural and socioeconomic backgrounds interact with each other was mutually beneficial to both the African American students and the white students here at Macon. The overall culture of the school, just that it integrated and it was open-minded. It's a liberal arts school. It's a forum for exchange of different ideas. And you get that from different peoples. I'm deliberately saying different peoples because you're looking at people from different socioeconomic backgrounds, racial backgrounds, cultural backgrounds. And so it was a benefit to all of us.
Were there any black faculty members when you were here?
0. Matter of fact, there were no minority faculty members here at all.
If you were writing the history of Randolph-Macon College, what events would you include in the period of 1970 to 74?
My arrival.
Right, okay. Our arrival campus, right?
The decision for the school to become co-ed, the arrival of the ladies. My graduation. and I said that because I did create some upheaval when I was here the last 3 or 4 weeks. We had the Yellow Jacket Weekly.
Right.
And I decided to reduce to writing many of the thoughts that I had that I've been wanting to express for almost 4 years. Well, I did.
Were you on the staff, or was this a guest column?
This is just a letter to the editor.
A letter to the editor, okay.
And I wrote these little letters to the editor that I would say 75-80% of the campus student body disagreed with. Well, I wrote them anyway. Finally, I reached the point where I wrote my last letter to the editor of the Yellow Jacket Weekly. It criticized Southern traditions, the flag, Confederate uniforms, Dixie, Kappa Alpha fraternity. I was walking back to my dorm from working in the gym students caught up to me and said, Reggie, the Yellow Jacket Weekly was just distributed. I wouldn't go back there if I were you. I said, what do you mean? I said, Reggie, they didn't like your letter. I said, what do you mean? Just don't go back to the dorm. I said, oops. So I went up the street. As you know, Randolph Macon College is surrounded by a black community. I went up the street because I used to play cards with the guys all the time. And I hung up there for a while, and I called one of my brothers, and he called the other two older brothers. And he rounded up a couple other buddies. They came here. They escorted me to my dorm. I couldn't believe it. The inscriptions that were on my door, the hatred.
Oh, it was just in an afternoon.
It was an evening. The sheer hatred that was seen in those, the N words was frequently used about offending that proud Southern culture. I was really afraid. I would say that galvanized the few blacks that we had on campus more than anybody else because they felt they had to protect me.
So this was the last weeks of school of your senior year?
Yes, probably the last 2 or 3 weeks of the academic year.
Well, what happened? Were your brothers couldn't stay on campus and go to class with you, presumably, so how did you manage?
My next to the oldest brother, who's a fool, by the way, went over to the Kappa Alpha house. I said, Mom, don't go over there. He said, I'm going over to blank the blank anyway. And a couple of his buddies went over there, confronted whoever came to the door, and he introduced himself, said who he was. I am told by a Kappa Sig who was next door and heard it. He said that my brother told him that if anybody touches one blank string on my little brother's head, I'm going to hold this fraternity responsible. And he said, I'm going to blow up this whole blank house. He was in the National Guard at the time. He had access to live ammo. Believe me, he would have done it. And the word got around. Dean Andrews, the wonderful gentleman he was, he said, we'll make sure that you're going to be okay.
Wow.
I was scared. I will tell you that I was. I really was. When I walked across the stage and received my degree from Mr. Wright, and I shook his hand, he said, Reggie, it's been quite an experience having you here. I said to him, thank you, Mr. Wright. You don't have to worry about me. I'm not coming back here.
So that left sort of that left on a bad note, I guess.
That's true.
So how long was it before you did come back to campus?
Quite a few years. I received a telephone call from James Henry, who I indicated before, worked over in the print shop. He said, Reggie, you're not going to believe this. He said, but we have a black professor up here. I said, I don't believe you. He said, yes, we do. He said, her name is Charlotte Fitzgerald, a wonderful lady. And I said, well, I just don't believe it. He said, come on up here. He said, I will introduce you to her. And at the time, I was working in the city attorney's office. I went down to the garage, got my car, drove straight up here. And James carried me over to Foxhall and introduced me to Dr. Fitzgerald, with the warmest smile, most wonderful soft voice of anybody you're going to meet. She says, happy to meet you. She said, I've heard a lot about you. She was a wonderful lady. She died of a blood disease. I think she was here for maybe about 5 years. And so James Henry called me again. And he said, Reggie, he said, I told you things are changing up here. He said, they're really changing. He said, we have this new president up here who is a tremendous guy. He said, you'll like him a lot. I said, Mr. James, I told you I'm not coming back up there. And so my wife was at luncheon. with Ralph Crosby, who at the time was on the board of trustees and the board of associates. And my wife worked in the personnel department of the Federal Reserve Bank, and he invited her to come up here and recruit. And my wife's name is Hattie. She said, well, my husband is an alumnus of Randolph-Macon. And so he said, oh. She said, oh. He said, oh. She said, yeah. He said, well, I'd like to meet him. And so he called me one day, and he invited me. I found every excuse not to come up to Randolph-Macon. Well, you can't say no to Ralph Crosby. So the third time I said no, he said, well, I can come over and pick you up. He said, we can go out to lunch and we can talk. We went out to lunch. We talked. He spoke about the changes that were coming about at Randolph-Macon. He said, well, why don't we do this? At least give me a chance to introduce you to the president that we have there. Liddell Payne was one of the best things that could have happened to this school. Well, 2 years later, I was a member of the Board of Associates.
Ah, very good. Good.
And I have been very active ever since.
Yeah. Good.
I proudly tell people Randolph-Macon College is my alma mater.
That's great. Were you going to be coming back up here next week?
Yes.
Speaking at the Martin Luther King Day celebration?
Yes, and I'm excited about that.
I am too. That sounds very good. So we'll look forward to hearing more of your reflections about the college then. So any final thoughts or stories or anything that you'd like to share?
Not so much as to say that one of the best things that could have happened to me in my life was Randolph-Macon College. The experience, the way I grew and developed here, prepared me for life.
Mm-hmm. Well, it sounds like you were one of the best things that happened at Randolph-Macon College as well.
I hope I was.
Yeah.
No, take that back. I hope I have been.
Yeah. Good. Well, and to continue many more years of connection.
Yes,
Good.
for sure.
Right. Well, Mr. Barley, thank you very much for making memories today.
Let me say this. The entire time that I was at Randolph-Macon, I was never known as Mr. Barley. It was just Reggie.
Okay. Well, Reggie, thank you for being here today.
I am very, very glad I could make it.
Good. Thank you.
Okay. All right.